CDR that present. Sorry, just got a bit of echo. All good. Yeah. Cool. Still echoing. I'm just going to turn the sound off on this one. There we go. Cool. All right. So give me 1 moment. All right, so when we're talking about that stage around partnering for a CDR solution, what we're trying to understand in this conversation here is around what are the pieces that you can get from a partner and what are the pieces that still have to remain with yourselves as the data holder organization. And so everything that I presented on that first slide in terms of scoping the components, those are things that we should be able to provide as part of a partnered solution where you go, well, what does it take for me to actually get my solution onto the CDR infrastructure and be able to share data with from customers to recipients? But we also want to be very clear about what are the parts where your partner relies on you to do work as well. And those things we expect never to change. And so expectations around that is the authorization of who gets to share information. So as a partner, you're never really looking to be the one that maintains the rules around which customers can and cannot share data. So if rules change around age restrictions or things to do with financial hardship or things to do with potentially domestic violence related things, those sit with the data holder as the person that goes, well, these are our customers and we want to be able to control access to that information. So your partner will never really kind of blend into that area of the work. So always needing to maintain that you have that role and responsibility as part of a shared solution. Also, the sourcing and transformation of data to the specifications of the CDR. So your partner, in this case, would never actually take or inspect or look at the data and go to change any of it. So that expectation go, well, where is my data coming from? How do I upkeep all of my data quality metrics around timeliness, correctness, consistency, all your regular top 6 data quality metrics? You're looking to hold those yourselves. Then the last bit around the actual usage of the CDR ops tools that you might get are the sort of things that you would be looking to take tools from your partners, but also you're the one running those. So there could be elements of where you might look to share responsibilities in there, but the expectation when the customer picks up the phone and talking to you. All right. So all of that the left-hand side, so the sort of preparation to consume the things that you're going out there and partnering for, that's where you can kind of go, well, logically, that's where my part of the organization sits. But then from there, you can work with your partner to take that next bit on to enable consumption for all of those components by the data recipients, the regulatory bodies, and the Australian public. So on this, the big question that we get along most of it is, well, why does authorization and ownership of data quality need to remain with the data holder? And the simple things that as a partner you should be looking for is someone that doesn't actually collect any of that private data needed to enforce any policies. But looking at sort of data sort of protection and all of your requirements around who can use, who can access data, how you share data, the more that you can say, okay, well, private information isn't passing back and forward or being used by your partner, the better. And so we take the position, we don't do any of that. We also don't store, inspect, or change any of the information that your customer is choosing to share with their recipients. So that's why all of those needs for data quality and data privacy all live with you as the data holder. We only ever seek to pass information through. All right, so this probably the slide with the most detail, but the one that really kind of calls out how much work there is to do and how much work there is to keep doing for a data holder solution. And this is informed by our experience in the ADI space so far. So looking at once the launch happened and then what goes into regular communication with our clients and things that change with the CDR every time there's a new regulatory release or there's a new note from the data standards body, what we do and what we have to say work with our partner on and what they do on their own. So when we talk about what you maintain and iterate as the actual holder of the data, as I mentioned before, data quality, anything related to a compliance change in the laws related to who can share data or who needs to be blocked. Most importantly, though, is that this expectation that your obligations to the CDR will constantly evolve as your business does. So whether you're launching new products and those new products are ones that are designated under the CDR, you'll have more work to do to be able to bring those up and onto the platform as well. When you have trial products that exit trial periods, we know that there's some laws, some regulations changing around that at the moment as well. So there's this constant evolution of what products you're needing to make available to your consumers to share. And then also one of the other things that we've seen through the ADI release and now going into the non-bank lending releases, new products are mandated, and as those new releases happen, you'll also have to go and iterate on your solution as well. The current example being buy now, pay later products and reverse mortgages. So ADIs that are currently up to spec and standard on the CDR, once the non-bank lending release gets brought into play, they have to maintain that those extra products are available to share as well. There's also an element of maintaining your capacity for training, because all of the tools that we have constantly iterating, the requirements related to what customers can ask for, what customers can do, sharing of consents with businesses, all of those sort of stage-wide approaches to functionality on the CDR. As they change, there's always a need to do more training, more uplift of your staff to be able to support your customers. And then finally, you've got some of the more procedural monthly or quarterly processes around lodging reports, biannual in that case, or things you have to do around when you have scheduled outages, or when we have scheduled outages as well. We have to be posting those so that there's notification to the market around when those are going to occur and what the impacts of those are. So those are very much the things that will always sit at the side of the data holder. In terms of what you can expect to get out of a provider, that's the list on the right. So whenever there are changes to the product reference data or consumer data APIs, your partner will be working to make sure that they're always up to standard on those. Always maintaining a fully compliant user interface for the customer consent flows and metrics. And if there are any changes there, to be able to uplift those, improve those, and actually make more consent to sort of throughput and conversion. This is me speaking a little bit off plan at the moment, but my expectation at the moment with the CDR is that we're going to see a little bit of a shift towards how we can actually get more people to finish those consent processes. There's been a big focus right now on releases related to metrics. Those metrics are giving people that are inspecting the flows a lot more detail on hourly basis of where customers are in the flow that are dropping out of consent flows and what components of those there are. Now, as a product manager looking at that, that is a group of people gearing up to figure out how they can improve those conversion flows. So where you're seeing, commentary out in the market from different providers around, the amount of coverage of accounts that are on the CDR versus the amount of usage of the CDR processes, you can feel a shift there that really starting to think about, well, how can we inform ourselves on what we need to change about the platform so that more customers actually go through their consents and we increase the amount of usage of the CDR. And so with that, metrics reporting APIs, those are the sort of things you should be looking to be able to get from a partner as well. So we're not talking about anything to do with the actual movement of your data from one organization to another, but it's all the metadata reporting that happens around the outside of that. You should be able to upload to. Operations dashboards for your staff to be able to do these processes. So you'll get a run through of each of the screens and things that we can provide that help you with those sort of components. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail about what's in an operations dashboard. You'll get that soon. You also have offshore support via a contact center that's available 24/7. But then you start getting into the more sort of control aspects of what you get out of a partner. So an example of that is the partner can take on the responsibility for constantly monitoring the data recipient log so that they can go, well, if someone is now being retired from the CDR infrastructure, that any consents related to those parties disappear as well. So there's also that level of governance that you put over access to the CDR on both sides of the data holder and data recipient. Also, just generally, a provider like us, make sure that we give you a little bit extra around the solution. So annual penetration testing, attestations, and ASA 3150 reports to help that you guys have the ability to look at something that has been independently verified as being a robust solution, as well as we do monthly usage reporting so you can actually understand how your customers are choosing to share data. So one of the things that we view as being a bit of a problem around the CDR at the moment is it is a little bit weighted towards the recipients. So the recipients get all of the value creation use cases, and we're looking to see what we can do around that to actually make it so that a provider of the data, such as yourselves, can make a little bit of a defensive play around your investment as well. So understand what your customers are looking to do, perhaps what they're looking at other recipients for, what's interesting them in the market that makes them want to go and share their data. Just to provide a little bit of extra intel that you can take to your own product managers and say, hey, this is something for us to look at. And then finally, we also manage all the processes around the security controls and certificate management and all of that as well. So that's the kind of split. And so if I was to summarize all of those bullet points into 2 bullet points, it is really just you own your data and your control and your transformation of your data. And your provider owns all of the pieces around actually allowing that to be exposed securely to the market. Okay. So like I said, that was the initial. This is the first part of the presentation. So yeah, if you do have calls that you need to make now, what you're going to get is a screen flow of the solution, which is just all of those pieces in a little bit more detail. seeing how this actually works. So we're going to present a complete flow of a data sharing process between a recipient and a holder. And so a lot of those things around what are the responsibilities that happen in the data sharing flow, we'll call out screen by screen so you can understand how this all gets pieced together. So we're going to start with product reference data sharing. So this is the November component. And really, this is simple. It's one slide. This is an example of the ACCC product comparator tool, and it's just where a business who does not need to be an authorized recipient, it can be publicly available, just says, okay, well, what are the products that are offered by each of the different providers? And in terms of that, the ownership of the pieces, yeah, like I said before, data aggregation and transformation and providing that formatted data to your partner, that lives with you. But in terms of what your provider will do, validating that that data meets all the requirements of the ACCC, sharing it through the CRD APIs, and then providing the user interfaces for your staff to actually be able to share that data. Now, with a solution like our one, you have a couple of choices here, and you'll hear me talk about this a few times through this presentation. We offer the tools that allow you to launch this as fast as possible using pre-built white labeled solutions like portals, but underneath the APIs are exposed. So if you do have quite a strong digital identity that you want to keep, or you have an experience that you want to be able to maintain, the same APIs that feed our solutions that we white label portals and user interfaces over can be exposed to you to be able to build your own solutions. Now, they are often longer to take to market, but they do allow you to keep that digital strategy or digital identity that you're working with. So product reference data, if you want to ask more questions about it after the session or later on, please feel free to, but it's not really the area where there's the most gotcha. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. Really what we want to do is start stepping through what a full consumer data sharing flow looks like to let you know what those pieces are. So what we've got here is a simple data recipient flow. It's set up as a simple loan flow. So you could imagine your customer is going to a new provider and the new provider saying, hey, look at how simple our digital loan application flow is. Let's step through the stages in a mobile application. So it's a simple identification of who they are as a customer with some information around what they're trying to apply for. But this is where it starts getting into the CDR component, which is the initiation of CDR flow to share the data. So they might go and provide some information around, okay, how this information is securely shared, why you feel safe doing all of this, but this is all on the data recipient side. So none of us have to do anything in this part of the build. There'll be some information that just tells the customer what they're sharing, how long they're sharing it for, those sort of things, and who the supporting party here is. So our partner Basic provided these screen flows, and you can see down the bottom that they have to identify who they are. So everyone knows who they're sharing information with. But this is where it actually starts to get into work that we need to do. So the first stage is that the user has to be able to represent who they want to share data from. Now, this is where there's some interesting conversation happening at the moment around branding. So the general perspective that's being taken with the consumer data right is if the customer believes that they are operating with a certain brand, that's what has to be presented to them in the CDR. So whether you are working with a loan provider that is backed by another organization behind the scenes, if the face that they call, that they see when they're signing up for the product, or the brand that's told to them when they pick up the phone and they talk to them, that's what needs to be represented. So when you hear people talking about the difference between the data holder and the brands are that way to represent what the customer believes that they're working with. So one of the things we'll talk a little bit about later on is the need for you guys as providers to be able to look at it and say, well, what do I actually need to expose to the CDR as the faces that we bring to the market versus the data holder where the information actually comes from, because that will dramatically change your solution.
And could I just for clarity, and if it's helpful, so in this flow, I as the customer am looking to acquire a product with Piper.
Yeah.
But I'm currently banking with, well, I bank with Westpac. So it's me looking to Piper to actually onboard one of the products, and Piper then is going to integrate with.
Yeah, absolutely correct. So in this process, you'll see that the user has to select the bank. So they're expecting, like I said, that brand that they know in the market to be in that list, but they can click on it. In terms of what we provide into that part of the solution is everything related to the registration of the recipient, so that we know, okay, that this recipient can ask for a share of data. We also look at the validation. So every time a consent is updated to know that, okay, yep, it's that business that's trying to ask for data is still permitted to do so. Like I was talking about before, that ability to monitor who's an accredited data recipient and freeze out any consents that aren't, that don't need to be provided anymore because those businesses may have folded or they've, stopped participating in the ecosystem. And then finally, exposing the information underneath that actually says, okay, yeah, these are the data holders that we have. And so when you actually select who the provider is there, that everything gets routed to the right place. So you're kind of going to get a sense here that whenever there is a communication that happens between a data recipient and a data holder, that's what you wouldn't need to be maintaining yourselves in a partnered relationship. Yes, sure.
This is all electronic. What happens if your point of sale is face to face? Is the expectation that business manager in a car dealership, for example, actually says, hey, do you want me to go check out all the competition while they're in front of them? Is that the expectation?
Oh, from the data holder's perspective, shouldn't matter. So whether they've created a flow that's available in a mobile app, a website, a point of sale system, you still have to be able to share your information to it. But the important part is who is that party that's actually interacting and making that consent. So whether that's something that you've done on your own mobile phone, you're doing at home on a laptop, you're in a dealership and they hand you a tablet and say, okay, you can run through the flow yourself. That should never be something that's delegated to the actual recipient. It's always that end customer that's going through this process and saying, yes, I'm happy to share my data. But in terms of the mechanisms that we have to share out to whatever those endpoint, those user interfaces are, as a data holder, it shouldn't change the work that you have to do.
I'm just thinking about the experience in the dealership, like what that would look like if I'm sitting in a car dealership and they go, oh, here's our product, go shopping while they're sitting in front of them, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that probably, when I spoke earlier about the product reference data component, which is all that publicly available information that can be used to compare the different data from the different providers, yeah, absolutely. That can be used by the dealership to go look at, okay, these are the different parties underneath and what types of products they offer. But at that point, I wouldn't expect that experience to be actually using any real information from that customer. So you're not actually comparing products that includes things like their transaction histories or actual information around their accounts.
That's why rates would come into this, right?
Chime in, Tom. Hi,
Yeah, sure.
Beth Dissington at Basic, so we're part of the Cuscal family. Is your question more about, are you coming from a auto lender perspective and using this as a data recipient opportunity to determine whether the customer wanting to buy the car, you can assess
not
them?
so much the car, more around, I'm in the dealership and, oh, come into this office and how can we help you with finance?
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
Yes, so finance
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
yes. So in that instance, that dealership would be a data recipient participating in this. So they would be effectively the piper. To do that as a dealership, you would have some kind of solution where you could, if you're like wanting to acquire financial.
If we choose not to be a data recipient in the first phase of the rollout,
Yes.
what happens then? Like, sorry, I'm asking what to talk about. Is the expectation that we have to be able to provide competitive information,
No.
allow the customer to access competitive information while I'm sitting in that interaction?
I think you're on the right track, but what I think is going to happen is if you're going into a dealership and they are given a tablet, like you said, or whatever system they have, the data, I think it's the recipient data, but where does that data flow back to? Is the data flowing back to the dealership or is the data flowing back to the financier? Because you were involved with the financier and the dealership, right?
I'm looking for the finance, yeah.
Yeah.
So Toyota and
Yeah,
Toyota
okay.
Finance, right?
So your dealership would go there, but I think the question is, where does the data?
No, I'm just interested. I'm doing change management, so I'm interested in around what
I'm
the
interested in
experience is
flow
going
of
to be
data.
for the customer and for our business manager in the dealership. Like, what are the obligations that they're going to have to fulfil while sitting with the customer? That's what I want to understand.
Okay, sure.
Because this is all electronic, so this, a good chunk of our finance is written in the dealership with the customer in front of them, not on a phone.
Cool. Okay, this is probably a really good way to like draw a line between that data recipient and data holder side of it. So if the customer is with another financial institution, not you, say that they're going to, they're part of a mortgage flow, and as part of that mortgage flow, they want information around the existing loans that they have with other providers.
Yeah.
The expectation is that you are able to share that information to that mortgage flow. So that side is what we're talking about today, which is the data holder experience, which is your obligations to always provide that information out to an accredited data recipient that's asking for that information and the customer's consenting to it. In the dealership scenario where, say, you want to provide a better experience to your customer, let them go browse, let them shop while you're looking at, okay, what's the best sort of offer I can create for them? That's that data recipient side of the solution. And everything that we're presenting today doesn't actually help you do that. So there is a separate program of work that you need to do to be able to stand up a data recipient solution. Definitely a much better conversation to have with basic leaders in the market around that, and they can talk about the different ways that you can embed data recipient flows into your products, your experiences, and your environments. So through the data holder solution, you're not actually going to get anything that's going to help you in your own flows because it's provider side, not consumer side. The data holder side, according to these regulations, not discretionary. You're going to have to do it. The data recipient side, always discretionary. So now, if we take that example of, this is the mortgage provider and they're grabbing information about customers that have loans with, say, Toyota Financial Services, this is where the next piece comes in. And this is one of the ones where we're actually talking about how we identify the consumers. And so like I mentioned before, we don't actually store any information around who the consumers are. This is probably the one piece of data where we go, we capture something, which is the mobile phone number and the name. And all we need to be able to say, hi, Tom, I need to be able to send a one-time password to a certain identifier and I need their mobile number to be able to do it. So what the provider does, so Cuscal in this case, is we provide a user interface that you can brand up with your branding that says, okay, we need to do a one-time password process where the customer enters in whatever that identifier is for your business. And so this is where that other part of the complexity for your organization comes in. So if you've got multiple brands out there in the market and you're all using a common identity store with unique identifiers underneath it, great. That's one link through where you can say that these identifiers uniquely identify a resource and the brand that they're from. If you've got a business where, say, you have email addresses being used as an identifier, and that customer might have multiple products with your organization and you've stood up multiple profiles, then it becomes a little bit more difficult and something that you want to speak with your provider about, which is that need to maintain sort of a straight path for every brand through to their identity solution so that you're never mixing up consents. One of the things that we're not allowed to do is bring information across brands unless the customer has actually said, I want to share information to this brand, I want to share, and they all have their own authorization flows. So say, for example, you have 2 different auto finance brands in your portfolio and the customer selects the first of your brands. When that response comes back, it will only have information for the first of those brands. It needs to be a separate authorization for any following brands that they do. And so what we ask from the data holder in this scenario is the actual validation of that customer identifier and the information that comes back with that. So if the customer puts in tpaconi@gmail.com as my customer identifier, coming back from that will be, okay, well, this is the phone number that you use to send that person a one-time passcode. And then also the other part of the information that you need to provide on this is your own CDR policy. So your provider won't ever draft the CDR policy for you. This needs to be all of your policy around data sharing that needs to be surfaced customer at this stage. Now, every screen flow of the user journey that you're about to see here has a whole lot of rules baked into it. So whenever those rules change, we are constantly updating our UI to make sure that we're complying with those rules, but sometimes we will need to come back to you for the exact content that needs to be placed on those. So it is a pretty heavily controlled environment, but you can expect to be able to brand it, but not so much change it. So if you're looking at the ordering of this flow and saying we would like to do a different customer experience, that may not be permitted. In terms of the one-time password process, the generating and sending of the one-time passwords comes from us, the provider. So the customer will get a one-time password from our identity solution. And when they put the one-time password back in, we'll verify, okay, that one-time password went to the phone number that you provided us, that you said would belong to that customer, and it was a success. And then we take that and say, yeah, this customer verified themselves against the information you provided, back to you as the data holder. And from that, that's the first point of you needing to provide information that needs to be shared. So the next flow for the customer after they've identified themselves is actually saying, okay, well, what information do you want to share? And so this is where that first response that we send to you that says this customer has authenticated, you say, okay, I'm happy to provide this information about the customer's accounts. And what you need to be able to provide is the list of the customer's accounts that need to be shared, that need to be available to be shared, as well as the list of accounts that don't need to be able to be shared. So in that portal, they get everything that shows this is my holdings with your business, and this is I can share information from my transaction banking account, I can share information from my lending account. There may be another type of account that's not designated under the CDR that they don't need to share information from. But that package of information is fairly standard and comes back to us to present to the user on the screen. And then that user on the screen is able to say, yes, I want to share information from account A, account B, but not account C. And like I mentioned before, if you do have a multi-branded business, one brand at a time at this stage. In terms of confirmation of authorization, this is that next stage that customer goes through where they're actually starting to say, okay, within this certain account, this is the data that I want to share. I want to share it for 3 months. I want to share it for 12 months. I want to share it for a day or a single one-time use. And all of that information is worked on by us. So that is the collection of what their consent is to their data. We store and record that consent authorization. And then that's where we provide back to the recipient, this is what this customer has agreed to share. So all of that communication between the data recipient and the data holder is all handled by your partner, and you don't have to manage any of that handshake process. And then we provide all of the authorization tokens underneath that allow that provider to say, I want to be able to request this data, to create the link and share it. One of the other things that we've got in here is this notifications. So certain scenarios that will happen, whether they're joint accounts, business accounts. Say, for example, me and my wife are going through like a loan flow and I've started the process. She will get a notification that says your husband has started to share this data. And if you've set it up so that they also have to provide consent, they get a link to be able to say we need to do it as well. Now, those notifications, they come from us. But like I was mentioning before, the APIs are available for us to trigger them so that you can send them yourselves. So if you want to maintain those to come from your own inboxes with your own branded templates, you can do that as well. There are some requirements around how those notifications need to look that we would be able to share with you and say, well, this is what your templates need to at least include. The actual sharing of the data, this is the next stage. So the customer's got the big tick that says, yep, you've given all of the consent and provided everything that says this is what you want to share. The data recipient's been authenticated and the data sharing is about to commence. The actual collection of the data itself. So the customer has said, I'm happy to share a one-off 3-month package of information related to only my transaction banking account. The expectation is that that request comes through to you as the data holder. You're doing all of the work in the background to go and collect that information to the required agreement by the customer. So, and that process is managed through what we call our B2B APIs. So we provide a set of APIs that say, this is the request that's coming through to you and what needs to be included in it. We get a response back and then we take it from there and serve it to the market. Now, the benefit for you is that those B2B APIs are intended to be more stable than the ones that the CDR have more frequent regulatory changes on. So we ask for a more general package of information that is controlled to what needs to be provided. And then if there are changes around standards related to security or how many of those processes go between the data holder and the data recipient, we do more of the work there. So one thing that will happen is, say, for example, we talked about data quality and the responsibilities that you have to maintain data quality of the solution. Our solution will say when there has been a response that doesn't meet the requirements that go back to the data recipient. So if there is missing information that is mandatory, you'll get an error that says, okay, you've got missing information that's mandatory. But like I mentioned, we don't actually do inspection of the data itself. So we will never actually send you back a packet saying you sent us this with the actual customer information in it. That responsibility will live with you to actually go, okay, well, I got a response that said it's incorrectly formatted. We can work together on that. But the actual, what is the content of the information, it never touches our eyes. So now we're going to start talking about the other things that you have to provide to the customer that aren't related to the actual sharing and movement of the information. So one of the things that you have to be able to provide is somewhere for your customers to come in and view the consents that they've made to all of the different data recipients and also manage them themselves. So we provide an interface to the customer that says, you can log into this portal and this portal will show you all of the consents you've made. So you might have made a consent to Basic, you might have made another one to the Commonwealth Bank, you might have made another one to some aggregating provider, and you've decided that, okay, I don't actually like the sharing of information to that organization, I want to stop it myself. That customer is able to log in and say, I want to cancel this consent. Similar to everything that I showed you before, we provide a fairly same experience between sharing data and logging into these custom tools. So for the customer, it shouldn't feel different whether they're going through a one-time password flow to agree to share data to whether they want to log in and see their information. So it's the same process. Everything I mentioned before with one-time passwords happens again, but the difference is they land in a portal rather than land in a data sharing environment. So not going to go through much more about the customer identifiers there, it's the same. But in terms of that user interface, this is that other area where I mentioned where we provide an out-of-the-box white labeled portal that you can put your brand over the top of. But should you have your own digital identity that you want to maintain, you want to host this within your own online logged in environment, the APIs are available for you to build your own experiences around these. You can't pick and choose which functions you use. They are pretty standardly specified. The customer must be able to do X, Y, and Z. So you need to copy that same functional set of requirements, which we can give you, but you can do it in your way on your own technology stack. So within this environment, the customer gets, the customer has to be displayed all the historic consents that they've provided, whether they are still active or whether they are ones that they have been expired a long time ago. So there is some data retention element in this as well. And so when we talk about what data we do keep, it's all of this metadata. So within all of the things that will show up to the customer here, we'll see that account A was permitted to share data to Basic. And we've got the information around how long that consent lasted for, but we don't actually have any of the information in there about any of the data that moved to that provider. If you don't go with a partner solution, this is where the commitment that you have to make for a CDR build expands. So all of the things around not just looking at what you have to prepare for the data you have on your customers, but you also have to start managing the way that your customers use your data. And so that's what you also get out of working with a provider in this space. So you can condense what your responsibilities are to the data you manage, not how the data you manage is used. That makes sense. The last thing that we have to talk about in these consumer dashboards and an area that is evolving is what happens with business accounts where you have nominated representatives for a business. So previous experience to working at Cuscal, worked in a bank that only served business customers. It is a more complex environment. And my one warning to you in that space is if you are serving customers that are businesses, anyone that gives you a demo of a solution that doesn't include a flow for a trust or a company, and they just show you a sole trader flow and say, we handle businesses, ignore it, it won't help you. So what we have here is all of the components of the solution that allow a business to go in there and manage, okay, well, Tom Piccone Proprietary Limited has 4 authorized users, and I'm going to allow 2 of those authorized users to share the data. And this was one of those pieces where I was talking about how management of your customers sits with you. We provide the tools that let you have this portal that says who are the customers and how we can permit or reject data sharing for any of them. But that responsibility to say who those nominated representatives are comes from you. And that responsibility to actually action the customer's feedback and say, I only want these certain people to share data, is with you as well. Some feedback we've heard from our other clients and some potential clients in the ADI space is this is an area that's got a little bit of a gotcha coming up in this, which is, as we know that there's plans to move away from things like screen scraping and there's plans to rely more on CDR for data sharing. And so once the bigger players in the town around accounting packages like Xero and YOB start to latch onto solutions like these, the management of businesses will become a little bit more onerous because you're going to have more frequent interaction with the CDR, which means more frequent interaction with I need to permit or retire users from being able to share data. And the other feature of business customers is they change a lot. So my personal accounts, I'm always the person that looks after them. My joint accounts, it's me and my wife, unless something really bad happens there. But with businesses, you constantly have people leaving and joining organizations, which means they need to be updated, they need to be managed, and it can be quite onerous if you have a large business customer base. All right, so we're going to step a bit further into the CDR operations piece. So none of this here is about the actual sharing of data. A lot of this is about things that you need to do to maintain support for your customers and also to maintain the relationship between yourselves and the requirements of the ACCC. So in this, we mentioned that we have a Cuscal operations dashboard. Technically, this doesn't need to be provided. There's nothing in the CDR rules that say that something like this has to be created. This is what you get out of working with a partner, someone that goes, we provide the tool set around the outside that helps you manage your customers and manage obligations to the CDR. Now, in terms of the 6 tiles that are on there, yes, there is a consent management piece. So if a customer calls you up and says, hey, I'm not happy with some information that's being shared and I want to cancel that, and they're not going to log in and do it themselves, there is a tool available for your staff to walk through that with the customer and change any consents that are available. Same with product reference data. I mentioned before that product reference data is just some static information that you share out as your products change. We mentioned that there's multiple ways you can provide this data. This is one of them. You can go into the portal and you can put the product reference data in manually. You can also choose to use secure file transfer to send the data. You can also choose to use APIs. So there's 3 different choices here. Operations dashboard is one way to do it. Outages is the next section that you have available to. So the good thing about the CDR is that scheduled outages, ones that you know are coming, they don't kind of impact your service levels. So you've got a 99.5% uptime requirement against unscheduled outages. So if you know that something's happening and you go and you run through the processes properly and say, we need to bring the service down for a good amount of time while we fix something in the background, that is a scheduled outage you can notify along well in advance, and you do that through tools like this. So this tool has components for both yourself and your partner. So if you have an outage for your system, you can go in here and you can post that. If we have an outage on our solution, we will go in and we will post our outage. And then the solution will combine the 2 of those, and it will provide that data back to the market to say this is how long our solution is down for. In terms of the next section, which is metrics, metrics is a little bit of an onerous piece at the moment for the CDR. So one of the actually cool tools around it, something that I really latched onto as a product manager joining this team, was the cdr.gov.au portal has a well-built dashboard that can let you go and see how all of these consents are being used in the real world. So you can go look at all the different providers, you can see the types of requests that they're managing, you can go and see uptime requirements, you can see response times, you can see all of that. This is enabled and powered by all of these metrics. So the metrics that tell the market, this is how fast we provided our average response times. This is how many consents we have of the different varieties of data sharing requests. And if you don't work with a provider on these things, you need to manage those processes as well. So you're going to need to be looking at all of the information around all of the consents that you've served, come up with your own metrics, calculate them, serve them back to the ACCC. We do this stage for you. One of the things about our solution that you will see here is PRD and customer reference data. So product reference data and customer reference data, you technically could think of those as 2 separate pieces. The reason why we offer them together is because of the metrics, where a lot of the metrics require you to put statistics for your product reference data and your customer data together. So average response times, things like that. If you've got one solution for product reference data and another solution for customer data, you have to find a way to measure those 2 separately, crash them together and provide one consolidated figure, and that gets more complex. It just takes an element of the complexity out for a simple part of the solution, which is PRD. So that's why they come together. Notifications, that is not a place to see notifications. That is a place to control notifications. So say, for example, if there are requests from real customers to say, I don't need you to share all of this stuff with my wife every time we share information from a joint account, that's where you can control that. All of the notifications for the CDR purposes are considered to be service comms, so you don't need to worry about this in relation to any of your sort of spam regulations as well. None of this counts as marketing comms, so you don't need to think about things like unsubscribes and all that. So just a little bit of a thing there to stop any thought in that area, because I know it is a complex area to manage. And then finally, that last piece that I spoke about, the nominated representatives, that's your business and your business users. So that's where you go in to see all of the information around who's able to share information with business accounts. So all of these components and things that you get out of the box when you work with a partner, you need to consider those in your scope of work as well if you're going to do this yourself. Yes, and I know this is all starting to sound a little bit salesy, like, oh, look, come to us and, you know, you'll get all of this stuff. But really, as the whole goal of this is to let you know what a program of work is. There are other providers that will do similar sorts of things. This is just to let you know what doing it yourself looks like as well. So we didn't want to hide any of that information from you. This was the page I was talking to you about with the admin API. So everything I spoke to you about metrics, this is what those metrics are supporting. If you haven't had a chance to go have a look at it, the link is in the corner, cdr.gov.au, and then go to the dashboard link. You can go and have a look at all the way that the different providers are providing their information to the CDR. It's quite cool. But all of the stuff to support that you get from your provider. So you never have to worry about missing obligations related to this. Okay. All right, so we're flying ahead on schedule. So if you do have questions, please feel free to call them out. But what we'll go through now is what does an actual program of work look like now that you've seen the scope of the program of work? So quite a lot of pieces to build. Who joined you along this journey on creating these components, and how long does that look like it will take? What parts do you need to consider as part of the program that you want to create, and how long your partner might take doing this? So in terms of an implementation team that you get from us, I'm not going to speak about any other providers, but with us, you get an implementation manager that's dedicated to you. So that's that person that you go through in all of your planning, and that, you know, your status reporting, all of those regular sort of things that come around product management, so project management. One of the benefits of working with a company like Cuscal is we've been doing this for 60 years, and we've been doing this for a lot of regulated processes, whether you look at scheme compliance, card payments, NPP, we've done it on a lot of different scenarios other than just the CDR. So we've taken a lot of lessons on what really works in other programs. We've baked it into the way that we do CDR implementation. Within that, we've got our standard teams of product managers, engineers, QAs, product owners, business analysts that can help you along the way with all of the different things that might need to happen. So if there's an issue with testing your solution, we have people that will be there on standby to help look into the results, look into the responses, and go, hey, this is where we're seeing an issue with the data. How do we take that back to you guys to, say, implement a fix at the B2B API level? So that will be something that's available from the start, from the project, but what the project actually looks like itself is a little bit like this. So these are general milestones. Now, what I will say around this is our experience related to what we've seen in the market so far. And what we've seen in the market so far is ADIs. Non-bank lenders, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to learn as we go. But the general feeling is that with non-bank lenders, there is quite a little bit more branding that happens. So there is going to expect to be some elements of this where we have to do a lot more in parallel as we're serving more and more brands. Whereas the ADI space, it's more one-to-one or one to a few brands at the same time. In terms of the pieces that you're looking at your partner to be able to do, those are your green arrows, and your grey arrows are the ones where you have the greater impact on the time related to your activities that you need to do. So in terms of what it looks like for a provider, you're talking about, I think it was 10 to 16 weeks, depending on how complex the scenario is, with 2 drops, so a PID drop and an actual full customer data sharing drop.
So you mentioned 16 weeks, but I'm assuming that's 16 weeks from week 1.
Yes.
What is your sort of, given your experience in the market, your estimation of how much time it takes before the week 1 for the data holder?
Yeah, so I'll skip ahead and we'll come back to this one. So no, that's good. That's if it helps with the ordering of the thought process for it. So preparing for implementation, there are 4 key areas that you need to think about before you even get into the we want to mobilize and go. And once you've answered your questions in this, you will need to do an assessment of how long you think you need to be able to do to prepare for an implementation. But the main pieces that we have to think about first, in the top box, we've got detailing the obligations that you have that are specific to your business to the CDR. So you need to know which of your products are designated. You need to know, do you have any trial products out there? What are your obligations related to those trial products as they move out of trial period, or if you expire that trial and expire those products? Because there are some new changes in the regulations related to trial products. So, for example, previous regulations, and I hope I'm getting this right, specified that the data sharing of the full package of data kicks in when the trial goes into full into full release. Whereas now it's saying, okay, well, all the information you generated for the product in its trial period counts as well. So you need to be able to include that. So that, you know, if you have trial products, it means you've got a little bit of extra work to do. You also need to consider how many brands you need to surface to the market. So that was everything that I spoke about before with, you know, if the customer is interacting with a branded entity in the market, the expectation is that the customer interacts with that branded entity in CDR as well. And so it can cause a couple of problems. The whole idea around sort of if you're aggregating a whole lot of customers, the CDR doesn't exactly let you aggregate that technology behind the scenes. You still need to go brand by brand by brand. The next thing that you need to be able to do, and this is probably what will dictate the implementation of your work before your partner's work more than anything else, is actually understanding where the data resides and how you're going to collect and prepare it. So all of that data has to be accessible. All of the data needs to be stored in digital formats. I know that that's becoming less and less of a thing, but there are, products that are long-lived, such as, mortgages and things, where some of that information may not be digitally accessible, or might be on tape, or could be in all sorts of different places. So you do need to consider what you're going to do about that, and maybe what infrastructure you need to stand up to support that. I know, for example, business I worked at previously, quite a lot of information that was required for them to be active on the CDR wasn't held digitally. So that was a big part of that program, which was going and digitizing that information that was sitting on paper. And the next is how you actually make sure that that data meets the ACCC requirements. So there are standard formats, and we will provide you all of the information on the API specification so that you know what the data has to be able to match. But being able to transform the data to meet those standards is one. One bullet point that I haven't put in here is the expectations with relation to speed. So, and that's something you do need to work closely with your provider on, which is because you're working with a partner in the market, you both have to have some level of service level agreement on how quickly the data can be served, so that you need to know what your obligations are to get data to your partner, and then what your partner's processing speed to get out to the market can be, so you meet those obligations you have around processing time. All of the processing time is publicly available, as you saw on those dashboards, so people will know when you're not meeting it.
I have another question. Sorry. Do you know if there are any off-the-shelf templates for obligation, like an obligations matrix that people could use to switch on and off, or just to get started? Is there anything out there? Or is everyone just doing it themselves internally? Just because it's essentially the same information, right?
So how it works with us is we provide the Swagger files for what our business-to-business APIs are. So that gives you the total package of information that we're expecting to be shared on each of the different APIs that need to be hit. In terms of that expectation of, well, this is what a full response would look like, yes, you can get it from that. So it is fairly templated because it is fairly standard. We're all working to the same sort of obligation. But in terms of that planning piece around how you actually make your data fit that, I haven't seen anything like that yet. But probably an interesting bullet point to put down as a product manager. So yeah, like I mentioned, this is the area where the approach that you take will dictate the most time. So how you choose to prepare the data. So this is moving into that third box, detailing key technical characteristics. So everything that I spoke about with customer identifiers, you've got a standard identity store across all of your brands, and they're all mutually exclusive IDs. Okay, you've got a little bit of a head start. If you've got separate identity stores for each of your brands, well, okay, that works as well, but it just might mean that you've got a little bit more sort of vertical build to do, where you're copying solution for brand by brand by brand by brand, and you've got more testing to do. The next bit is actually that identification of the systems that are holding the information and how you're planning to move the information to the CDR infrastructure. So if you've got multiple core systems holding the data, most providers don't inspect your technical environment. So there's nothing in solutions that say, okay, well, if a customer is requesting certain things from the accounts API for two different products, that this solution knows they need to go and fetch information from technical system A and technical system B. Yeah, the systems that are out there from the providers don't do that. So there's always that expectation that you as the customer are driving in, this is where my information comes from. If you're planning to do that by an abstraction, or if you're planning to do that by multiple integrations, it's looking at that information and going, okay, well, how does this information need to be provided out? So, you can consolidate all the information into its own database. You can you can create your own API layer that knows how to do the orchestration to your platforms. It's all up to you, but that can change what this solution looks like for you, how much data you need to move, how much build you need to invest in. And then finally, the last stage about like preparing for the implementation and being able to see, what will impact that timeline that I showed before, is making all your selections based around the preferences that you're providing into. So, you know, for example, product reference data, if you're using secure file transfer, if you're using API, the solution build will be longer if you're using the API solution than if you're just doing a file transfer. But then you are taking on more process load that you need to keep maintaining for a little bit. It's your choice on how you want to run the show with that one. Do you want to use your own notifications or just use the triggers? Again, same thing. How much work do you want to do versus how much work do you want to just consume? And all of these things, you can change your mind in the future. So if you go, okay, I want to move from the secure file transfer option for product data sharing to the API solution, great, call up your provider and say you want to make that move. And then the last bit, yeah, dashboarding and UI, same sort of situation there as well. If you have a really strong brand identity and you want to make sure that that is on point, that's an option that's available to you. So really, out of all of those sort of things, if you're going to look at which box here are the ones that are most important, it's, yeah, understanding where all that data is and what your method of preparation for it is going to be. There is a huge amount of work to just say, I have a package of information in this account that is, you know, standardized and available account information for this brand for all of my customers, and that's ready to go. So every obligation that we have for the Get Accounts API or the Get Account Details API meets the specification and it covers it across all of my accounts. So, you know, if you want to use a framework for that, standard data quality metrics frameworks can be used for that. If you've got timeliness, accuracy, consistency, completeness, all of those sort of things, what is your method of going, okay, I'm going to overlay those concerns over the way that I provide data out. And if you hit certain objectives around that, great, you're in a position that's ready to share information. Where that kind of breaks down, you get a lot of sort of slowdown in the testing and conformance process. And then the other part is if you go to launch with some of those things, and then there are, you know, your standard rectification processes that say, okay, we're not getting the response that we need around Get Account Details, and that needs to be fixed, and there will be timelines specified for those. Does that cover that question, or does anyone want to go into more detail about anything that they've seen on this slide here?
It'd be good to give an indication, if you can, from what you've observed, how long people are taking to get ready with all this piece before being coached.
I'm going to answer this question for my previous employer where I saw it, because I did a really horrible job of introducing myself. I've only been here for 6 months. I'm the head of the data domain that looks after the CDR, but I also look after all of our data warehousing and data services that we provide to the rest of our company. So, you know, you probably hear me talking about things like how you prepare and extract data and all that sort of stuff that comes from that side of my world. So in terms of the timeframes for implementations of previous clients, I know very much about what work we did, but not so much information on how long they spent before engaging us. But from my previous employer, I can tell you that was a period of at least 8 months. So, but then again, a business bank. So complex environment, complex accounts in multiple places, you know, that sort of thing. So a lot of need to be able to get information from one source and have it available in the same place as information from another source, that create a lot of challenge in that environment. So I wasn't involved on the project team for that one, but just, you know, viewing it and seeing those challenges, it was a long process, a lot of engagement, a lot of time to select the provider, a lot of time to work preparing data.
I might just add something there, so just introduce myself. So my name's Stefan. I look after the commercial aspect of the Cuscal solution. So I know a few of you, believe it or not. What we're finding out in the market, when I generally speak to the market in general, is that there's no one size fits all this whole situation. Some, depending on the kind of, you know, and it doesn't even necessarily relate to size as well. A lot of it just comes down to what do you know about your customer and where is the information as well. So some of our customers might have 60 plus, 100 plus brands. And that's a very different piece to someone one brand as well. They might only have one core system. So there's no real one size fits all. But what we're probably saying is, particularly if you have multiple different brands and you have multiple customers, you can be looking at kind of 9 to 12 months to even get to the starting line. Now, if you're a little bit more of a simple business, it'll probably be a little bit less. But the key thing is that I've spoken to about 40 plus customers, and everyone's different in their experience there as well. So there's kind of no one size fits all per se. But I think with the way Tom guided, kind of that 8 to 9 months as an average is probably about right.
Yeah, and one thing to think about here as well, where you are a multi-branded business, this is not a single customer view initiative across all your brands. It's on a per brand basis. So you need to be able to provide the information about who this customer is and what accounts they have, what their interactions with your business are on a per brand basis. So if you do have an organization where that is split up by brand, the expectation is not to bring that all together.
About some brands, so we've got a product suite which is Wizard. There's a credit card which is Wizard Money. There's a revolving line of credit which is Power Up, and then the BNPL product. But they're all under that umbrella brand. Do I need to deal with 3 brands or just the one?
Okay, I've got to find a way to answer this one cautiously because I can't give you an exact answer because unfortunately that is something that you need to arrive on yourself. But the guiding principle for me is what is the brand identity that customer knows in the market, and to work with the regulatory partners on that. And if you believe that there is a consistent brand presence in the market where that customer understands Wizard, that's a lot different than, say, where you have brands where there is a clear demarcation between one organization and the second, where you can say that's a different identity.
Yeah, they're all served out of the same app, and I think probably I would consider them one. Things.
It's a little challenging though with the white labels, because like say a customer would look at a white label and see whoever it might be. So if you're a multi white label channel, once the loans originated, the customer, if they call up customer service because the system is sat with, let's say in this instance us, whereas the customer thinks they're dealing with whoever, ABC, Pty Limited. Once they start once the loan is settled, they'll then start dealing with us. So for all intents and purposes, the data is held with us, they're dealing with us, but they have a branding relationship through the front door. So I guess that's the part we're struggling with, is to try and kind of work through that relationship and who kind of owns what.
Yes.
Because the customer's thought process is different to ours.
Yes, absolutely. And I think just due to nature and timing of the industries that are being brought on for the CDR, I think that there is a little bit of guinea pigging going on with you guys, where the insurance companies are sitting there going, thank you, because they're going to have this problem as well. So in terms of, like I said, in terms of actually going, well, what are you committed to do? We can't answer that, but as part of the, like I say, detailing your CDR obligations, that process to engage the regulators and know what you have to be able to do, you can bring to us and say, okay, what does this actually mean for my implementation? We can spec out what that plan looks like related to that.
Might not be the right part of the presentation, but I'm interested in that data to be shared and where it resides, and then the point that it says data meets the ACCC requirements, right? So I'm sure organisations are looking at a level of data remediation and gaps in data and all that sort of stuff. I want to play out a role here just to see what would happen. So my mother's 85, she's not tech savvy. She forgets to change her email address and mobile phone with customer or companies that she deals with. She thinks this will be a great idea to go shopping and use the service, and she can't be identified when she goes in because the data that we hold hasn't been updated. And we've got she chooses to have all her correspondence via hard mail, and so we've got no visibility over the fact that her email has changed or her mobile phone has changed. How does that work? And where does all the obligations sit? Like, are we expected to validate and make sure all the data we're holding on our customers today is absolutely 100% accurate?
The good thing about the way that the CDR has been set up is that the obligations around maintaining information around contacting customers should be about the same as what you do for your digital environments as well. So if I take, for example, that scenario with a business saying, hey, I want to be able to share my data, and get to that screen that says, I'll actually go to it. It will get to the screen here, which says, okay, well, tell us what your customer identifier is. So when your mother puts in, this is what my customer identifier is, we make a call to you, the organisation, that says, okay, well, what's the way that we contact this customer to validate that identity? If you have old or incorrect information there, that code will go to that place. Your mother sitting there with this screen in front of her next to say, where's the code? She doesn't have access to that information. That flow can't proceed. In terms of updating that information, that would be an interaction between the customer and the data holder. So we don't get involved in any of that process around updating information. Yeah, So there's
It'll just be blocked at this point. Then she'll ring me and go, hey, I'm trying to do so.
Well, but also presumably she can make a complaint.
yes, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
you can make a complaint.
Yeah.
So that's another one of the processes, complaints management of customers.
If I may add something, as the data holder, there's a requirement to have a CDR policy.
Yeah.
And CDR policy actually has all the information in terms about contact and complaint information that we're talking about sometimes.
All right. Still great on time. Okay, so we were talking about the components of detailing out the implementation plans. I think we've covered that in quite a lot of detail. In terms of that, okay, well, what do we need from you in terms of an implementation? There are also some just process tasks that need to happen as well. So yeah, okay, at the beginning, we agree on scope of work, and either you've started working on what is your data build in advance, or we start working on that API build at the same time. There are some things that you need to do as well. So you need to register your business as a data holder on the portal, and there will be a process to purchase certificates and providing them to us so that we can install them. All of that component about specifying what configuration options you want to have. Then there's some sort of process components you have to do around notifying the ACCC around your plans for conformance testing. Then there's all of the piece that we do together around user acceptance testing of our B2B API environment. And then we also have a commitment in there with you guys around wanting to run staff training sessions so that, for using all the tools we have around supporting customers through this process, that you have enough people trained up that actually know how this works. I'm going to be honest about usership of the CDR and why this is potentially a gotcha. It's an infrequent process. So that need to have materials that are available for quick consumption with your staff to be able to go, oh, someone's asking me about the CDR, I can go get this information and I know what to do. I know how to access these tools and these portals, is the sort of thing that you kind of got to expect that people will need a refresher when they're asked to do it. It's going to be nowhere near as frequent as your processes for dealing with regular customer queries. The usership of the CDR just isn't there right now. There are plenty of people using it, but it's not at that frequency where these things get drilled into the same standard as someone calling up and wanting to interact with your regular products in your regular ways. Preparing test data is an important one in here when we talk about user acceptance testing. So, when we're going through the plan right at the beginning where you're looking at, okay, what is the scope of the data that I have to be able to create, prepare and transform, having a test data set available there that you can share with your provider that is not production data, it will accelerate that process somewhat. So when we talk about that 10 to 16 weeks, depending on what the partnership looks like, having readily available and well-formatted test data really does accelerate that process. The last thing about that is we also started talking about, say, things like certificates, things like configurations. If you are a business that's got loads and loads and loads and loads of brands, having all of that information come together at the same time allows your partner to do things in chunks. So we kind of call it the, what train are you getting at the platform problem, which is if you have all of your brands, all of the information that's required by us all comes in one packet, you all get on the same train, you're all tested to the same speed, you all get out of the destination at the same time. If you have different sort of teams working on your different brands and those aren't coming together, you end up with this really staggered process where your release balloons because we're doing a section and a section and a section. Product managers, product owners, all that sort of stuff, we love talking agile and everything. There's a bit in this that is just about rigid time sequence, things needing to happen at a certain time, things needing to be complete by a certain time. And when you have multiple brands, getting all of those together, it really does help you if you take that program rigor approach in there to get it all together at the same time. We go through our configuration in production and we go through all of our regular sign-offs. Then we have the process for PRD go live for registering the service with the ACCC. We do a post-implementation verification and then same sort of thing with notifying brands for full consumer go live and post-implementation verification there as well. So that's generally what a program looks like and where we need things from you in the process. Have we got any questions that you guys want to cover at the moment? Because I'm out of presentation materials and we still have a half an hour left to go. Oh, yes.
You mentioned about building API. API to API business to business connectivity, right? So you'll be building your way, you'll be building all things. Or the business is required to build their own API to connect to your API.
Yeah, so we have our end and we work with you for that integration connection.
So you work with them on it.
Yeah, so we publish all of our endpoints and we provide you with where the documentation is to go through those. But that implementation team that I spoke about, they're ready with you that entire time to start talking about that actual process of connecting. So we never enter your building and do the work in your building. We just work from our side. We work on, okay, what do we see when it hits our side of the fence? We're not we're not like a consultancy sort of, you can't come to us for an implementation team. We don't have the setup for that.
So we're going to responsible abstraction of the data.
Yeah.
Just to clarify something. So one of the things I never quite get my head around is the timing of the data itself. So like a lot of the kind of old core systems are pretty much batch related data, but some of the customer portals may have information at a slightly different speed. But what's the rule around the kind of lag time, I suppose, of that data? So if your core system is batch, is that okay in what you're provisioning from a transaction perspective, versus maybe an email and a phone number that might have been updated by a servicing team?
I'm going to be honest, I don't remember off the top of my head what the timing requirements are for that, but I know that there are expectations around the freshness of the data. And so we can send information that we hold on that back to you after this session so that you can get that.
Just to follow up on that, sometimes we'll engage panel debt collectors to collect debts, and in those cases, you might get a data feed every 30 days, one payment file, something. It might be as regular as some of the system. Have you dealt with anyone who's had to deal with that aspect, in implementing it?
Personally, no. That's another one of these ones, but we'll need to go back over the history of our customers and what we're working with, see if that one's popped up and what happened around that. Yeah. Yes.
We do know, apart from the system controls, obviously a lot of this is very system based, and the system controls to ensure that things happen at the appropriate time. But apart from the system controls, are there any other manual or human monitoring and reporting controls involved that organisations would need to implement and reflecting their, I'm not sure if it's your space, and reflecting their compliance plans, obligations through the controls, through the monitoring, etc. That's an outside and technical side.
Well,
you have templates that you can give to customers.
Yeah. So let me know if I'm answering this question incorrectly, but there are all of the things that we have to manage as part of the CDR obligations, and we provide tools to be able to do those. But there are other processes that you need to include in your program or your ongoing work that are related to obligations that aren't CDR specific, but are generally specific to vendors. So, all of the processes around how you do your vendor engagement, vendor management, all of that sort of stuff as well. And, by nature, we are a vendor to a lot of other companies. So we have standard templates and things that we run through for these processes that would be part of the work that we talk about to you as well. So, yes, all of the CPSs and all of the CPGs will apply for certain organizations. And we know how to work in those spaces.
I think, is it that you're asking about the obligations matrix, Tim? RCN, Tim?
That's,
when you're getting to the start.
Yeah, if it's all system based, I'm comfortable with that because it's built into the controls are built into the system. But if there's stuff outside the system and we need to measure and people need to attest to every 6 months, for example, clarity on what that is.
We might come back with a more detailed response for you on that one.
I just have a comment on the data latency question. So what we understand the CDR to say right now is that the data that is shared through CDR needs to match what is available through the other primary channels for the customer. So whatever they're seeing sort of on their online banking, that needs to be the same as what is shared through CDR.
Is that also, sorry, another question. Is that also just one of the conversations we're having internally? Is I hear a lot about like active customers. So like, they might well have a login to our digital platforms, but frankly, they've never ever used it. So what does that mean from a kind of an active consumer perspective? Is the right effectively still the same, irrespective of whether they use their digital channel or not?
Yeah. So I think Melita might be able to provide more. She's our compliance, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. So the way the principle right now, guys, is CDR is only the mechanism how the data is shared. So what the ACCC's expectation is, irrespective of where the customer goes, whether be to your online portal or you take a print and give it to them as a PDF file, wherever they go, the information should be consistent.
So I guess that's this question, right? I think there was a query earlier on, like some customers literally get a monthly statement on paper with regards to the transactions, and some will log on to a digital channel. And
Yeah.
get active. But
Yeah.
So are we differentiating the customer based on how they access the data? I don't know.
No, so irrespective of whether the customer is active or inactive, when they contact you as a business, what information they are getting,
Okay.
irrespective it's on paper or on an online channel, it would be correct.
Thanks.
So on that, how does that align to the previous statement that the data must equate to what is available online? So how did you, what you said, how does that align to what was previously said about the availability of data online? Because some data is not available online.
Yep.
And only available on paper or face to face,
Okay, so
particularly in the fleet debate.
right. So going back to one of the presentation points, it depends where the data is sitting. So if your data is not in a digital format and it's sitting in a outside the digital format, the customer cannot access the data currently online. So CDR requires your customer to do an online authentication for them to be able to access the data. So you'll have to bring that data, which wherever it's sitting, into an online format.
Right. So in other words, it's not if it's in the system, if the data is sitting in the computer system, so that's definitely the case. So it's not sitting somewhere in writing on paper. It's in a filing cabinet somewhere. It's definitely in the system. So that's the starting point. But let's say the online banking access is extremely limited for the customer. Then do we need to still make that data available, even though there is no online banking access to that data?
Yeah, that's slightly a bit of a regulatory technical question.
Yes.
And that is something where we have seen that conversation with the ACCC is very important in that particular case to clearly understand how does the customer interacts, where does that data sit? Because right now CDR says that a customer needs to be able to authenticate in order to get their data. They need to go online in order to see their information. So if they have never accessed online, then you also have that gap in terms of how does that customer even gets to CDR. So I would definitely suggest that's a conversation with the ACCC in that particular scenario to go, how does that work? Like, do we need to then transform all your data? And if it comes down to transform all your data to your digital space, then that's another piece of work that you need to prepare before even you start thinking CDR.
Great. So because we're early, we might just stop 15 minutes early, have some more networking time, some more lunchtime, catch up on emails. Yeah.
In the area.
Yeah, but please do feel free to come grab any of the Cuscal team if you have any questions about our solution or just the information we know. I get the feeling that the leader and the DT will be very popular there. So yeah, please feel free to tap them on the shoulder for some questions too. If you think of something outside of this session, please do feel free to send them through. So we will, monitor our inboxes for questions and make sure that we handle them for you. But it's been great having you here. Thank you very much.
Will you share the deck?
Oh, yeah, probably. There might be a couple of things to strip out, but yes. Thank you.
Thanks.